The LA Clippers are now viewed as one of the most functional and great franchises in the NBA, but they were not always like this. In today's episode, we're going to bring on a historian to talk about what the Clippers used to be like and how they have transformed into a winning organization on today's Locked On Clippers.
You are Locked On Clippers, your daily Los Angeles Clippers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, sir. You are locking in with the Clips, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Clippers the first listen of your day. My name is Darian Vaziri. I am a diehard Clipper fan, have been for 18 years, and I also host my own YouTube channel and podcast called Dime Dropper, where I talk about LA sports, especially the Clippers, and NBA history as a whole. And for today's episode, I'm really pleased to be joined by somebody who I talk to a lot about basketball, a great knowledge of the history of the game, and is a current Clipper season ticket holder and has covered the league before. My good friend Jason Levin to come talk about the history of the LA Clippers. Jason, So let's get right into it. You moved to LA from New York. Were you here when the Clippers moved to Los Angeles in '84?
Yeah.
What was the perception of the team when they first moved from San Diego?
Disinterest. Important and so powerful at that time that nobody seemed to understand why Donald Sterling wanted to move the Clippers to LA. There was no need. There was no reason. It made no sense. And that was the prevailing opinion amongst 99% of people in LA. It's just how it was. What are you doing? Why would you do that? You know, the Lakers are powerful. They're a brand, and they had just gotten Magic. So, you know, they were on a roll. And then here's the team from San Diego. Like, what's going on?
Yeah, moved into the sports arena. I'm guessing they were not close to sellouts in the beginning, right?
No, it was not even. No, it was ridiculous. You know, the sports arena was already pretty old at that point. Nothing compared to the Forum. It was kind of night and day. The Forum was really exciting. It was well lit. It was made for basketball. The sports arena was not. It was dull. It was tired. And the Clippers drew, 5, 7, 9,000 regularly for games. And once they started losing and they lost a lot, they'd have games of 3,000, 4,000 regularly. So it was like that for quite a while. I worked for the team for a year, kind of first job out of college. I was there for a full year, and it was the year they went 12-70.
What season was that? Wow.
Let that sink in for a second. 12-70, second worst record in the history of the league, and that was the year I sold tickets. So, and I had to go to every home game. I think we won 4 the whole year.
Wow.
And it gave me real insight into the organization and the level of cheapness and the disinterest in winning. And I think that's the most important thing people need to understand about Donald Sterling is that he didn't buy the team and move the team to LA to win. And winning was never even on his list, really. He did it to push his own celebrity, which worked. Not really to his favor in the end because of who he was, but that's why he did it. And also, he's an investor who never sold anything. He was and is famous for never having sold a building. He owns more, I think, real estate in LA than any individual and has never sold, ever, in 50 years. And his goal was to own the team, spend as little money as possible in every way, at every level, salespeople, executives, players, staff of any kind. He was the cheapest, lowest paying owner in the league the entire time, and then watched the value of the franchise grow. And that's the only thing he got right was he got in the right club. The NBA was a good club to get to. And it proved out when he sold, what he was able to sell it for. So, I saw it from the inside. It was kind of sad. I was in the end, but it didn't feel like it on some levels. It was run like a rinky-dink mom and pop organization. There was never any resources, and that continued to be the case through the '80s and through the '90s. And it was just kind of a joke in LA the entire time. The Lakers were great, certainly throughout the '80s and into the early '90s. And it was just they were the little brother that was kind of a joke, and you used them to see teams that you couldn't see if you couldn't afford to go to the Lakers. That was really for fans what the Clippers were for. I can't buy a ticket to see Clyde Drexler and Portland play the Lakers, but I can easily go see them play the Clippers, and that's how we sold tickets. Frankly, that was the pitch. You want to see Michael Jordan? Well, you can't afford to see him, in his one trip against the Lakers, but you can come see him here. And you can sit wherever you want. So that's
my uncle used to tell me that was the whole thing was come and see these stars of the NBA come beat up on the Clippers at the sports arena. So that
was the promo. Other than
I was going to say what prevented
beat up on the Clippers piece, that actually was the promo.
Yeah,
come see the other stars in the league.
What prevented the Clippers from, you think, moving and relocating when they were so bad and had such poor attendance? Like, how does a team stay in business?
Well, he had no interest in it. Well, they stayed in business because, it wasn't hard to stay in business. He had the money to keep them afloat. The question really is why the league allowed it. And that's really the bigger question. And that question was asked quite a bit. Why would they allow this guy to run the team this way? And there were discussions about it. But Sterling prevailed. He sued the league. I mean, he did a lot of things that would make you think the league would want to get rid of him. They never did. And it was a subject of a lot of discussion amongst a lot of writers, a lot of executives, and kind of a surprise that they allowed him to continue to run his business so poorly and so obviously. But they did. So that's just kind of how it played out. And he technically won that battle, if you want to put it that way.
So obviously the Clippers had a couple of playoff appearances in the 90s with guys like Danny Manning and Ron Harper and them. But do you think that gave anybody hope that the Clippers could eventually be something in LA? Like, what would you say was the lowest point for the Clippers in Los Angeles as like, this team is just a poverty franchise. There's no hope for them at all. You think it came in the sports arena days? I would assume the sports arena, not the Staples Center, right?
I mean, honestly, I think it was, probably I was there 12-70. Marcus Johnson was the star. He got hurt 6 games into the season. And I think, they were 3-3 to start the year. So they went 9-67. They had a 24-game losing streak. And in fact, the low point, I would say, and I know this because I was there, the person who was actually running the team was a guy named Andy Roser, who was an accountant, which tells you where Sterling was at. He was his accountant. He said, okay, you're in charge of the team now, including some basketball decisions, which was astonishing. And he was not a good guy, and he was not well liked for a lot of obvious reasons. And towards the end of the year, one of the regular ball boys, who wasn't paid, by the way, he did it for free, had been promised something and then it was taken away. And he actually attacked Andy Roser and fought him physically on the court after practice in front of the team. And remember, the guy he's attacking is the guy running the team. He attacked him on the court, hit him. They got down on the ground and were actually fighting. And this guy was beating up Andy. And the players let it go.
Wow.
That's the low point. They let the fight go for a good minute or so while standing there. And then finally, Earl Cureton, who I always remember for that, who was a really good guy, decided enough was enough, and he stepped in, and they separated them. Now, I don't think you can get lower than having the executive who runs the team being attacked in front of the team, and the team lets it go. So, and you only win 12 games.
Yeah, and I just checked.
If you can get lower than that, let me know. I don't see how.
I just checked, and the 12 and 70
Go ahead.
season was the 86-87 season, and that was obviously the one where the Lakers were, maybe people say, the
Correct.
best Showtime rendition of them all. So coming up, though, we are going to talk about when things started to shift. Was it Lob City? Was it 2006? Definitely during the Staples Center era. We're going to be talking about it all coming up. The 2022 FIFA World Cup is upon us, and it is fast approaching. Brazil and France have the highest odds to win the tournament, but if I were you, I would take a little look at Portugal. Their odds are plus 1,400, but they have a very underrated and talented team. Just won the Euro Cup a couple of years ago, and even though Cristiano Ronaldo may not be the face as much as it was anymore, they have a lot of talent. Remember to go to betonline.net to place your bets. It's your number one source for all your pro and college football betting needs, or basketball or soccer. Find all of the latest developments, game matchups, news, and podcasts, including the opening game of the 2022 FIFA World Cup. BetOnline is also your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including the MLB and even MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. Bet online, where the game starts. All right. So now we're going to talk about that's where it kind of shifted. Would you say, Jason, that it started to shift in the 90s when the Clippers had a couple playoff appearances? Did that really change any perception of them at all? Or did it really change when the Staples Center came around? What did you think? What was the perception when the Clippers were going to move into the Staples Center with the Lakers and the Kings? Did people feel that that would change their standing in the city at all?
Not change their standing, but certainly it was an upgrade. You know, it's a big upgrade. So everybody was pretty excited about that. I think, to go back a little bit, the Larry Brown teams did give everybody hope, because it was Larry Brown, who was, you know, one of the great
Great
coaches
coach.
in the NBA. He came in and really did turn the team around. They had real talent on that team: Danny Manning, Charles Smith, Ron Harper, Doc Rivers came in, who was a legitimate point guard. They were a good team, and they almost beat a really good Utah Jazz team in the playoffs. Ironically, typical Clipper luck, the Rodney King riot happened in the middle of that series, and they had to play one of the biggest games in Anaheim, not at the
Wow.
Sports Arena, and won the game. That kind of tells you something about the Clippers. So there was real hope for about a year there, but typical Larry Brown and typical Clippers, it didn't work out. He and Manning clashed, and of course, Sterling wasn't going to pay anybody, and within a couple of years, they were both gone. And so that kind of ray of hope was real, and then it was gone. And then it was back to business as usual. Bob Weiss was the coach, then Bill Fitch. I think they made the playoffs once and got swept. So up until Staples, no. I mean, it was kind of same old, same old. But then, you know, when they hit Staples and they got the young talent, you know, when you keep finishing that low, you get high draft picks. And of course, they ended up with Elton Brand and Lamar Odom, Darius Miles, Corey Maggette. I
Quentin
mean, it was an
Richardson.
extremely talented, exciting young team in a new arena. Cue ball. You know, they had the knucklehead thing going. And that was the, you know, in the new stadium, there was real excitement, and they had exciting players, which was not the case for a long time. Not only were they bad, they weren't even exciting. They weren't even fun to watch. And all of a sudden, they were both. They were young, they were in a new, exciting arena, brand new, and they were fun. And they didn't win. You know, they didn't make the playoffs, but they were fun to watch. They were exciting. And I think that was probably new arena. And people felt like, okay, you know, they're kind of for real. They have exciting young players that we can look forward to. Of course, that didn't work out because Sterling didn't want to pay any of them. It's the same story. As soon as somebody got good and got ready for a contract, he wouldn't pay them. And that went on for 30 years.
Did he ever
It's
think
astonishing,
that
really.
Did he ever think that maybe if he pays the players and has a successful product on the court, that he could generate more money because he'll sell out?
You would think, but no. It's just not. That was not his mentality. His mentality was, I'm going to spend as little as possible. And he really didn't believe or understand the difference in player quality. I think he just never understood that. And he had the wrong people around him. You know, he had Elgin Baylor, but he had all these other guys, including Andy, who was still there, by the way. in the Staples era who didn't understand basketball, and they were advising him. And they would constantly tell him, well, we really don't need that guy. He's good, but we can get somebody just as good. And that was kind of their philosophy, which was dead wrong, proven to be dead wrong, and they stuck with it. So it was a lose philosophy by a losing guy with losing people around him. And it was known around the league. So nobody wanted to stay there. Nobody wanted to play there unless you were drafted by them. And once you were, you just were waiting to get out. You were waiting to, your first contract was up and you could leave because you knew they weren't going to pay you and you hoped somebody else would. That was the perception, and it was the reality too. It was not a good franchise to play for. Their resources were terrible. The staff was terrible. Nobody got paid. People were unhappy, and it just leaked all over the place.
Donald Sterling, you mentioned some of the poor conditions and the way the players were treated. I mean, you mentioned Marcus Johnson. He talked about that they, in the off seasons, they would go to, or training camp, they would go to like Motel 6s and play in these rundown gyms in the middle of nowhere, or in like high school gyms that weren't good. And it's just a night and day difference from, that amazing training center they have in Playa Vista right now. But I guess the real change comes, you mentioned,
we're getting there.
Yeah. I guess the real change comes.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're getting there. But it's astonishing that it took, he just wouldn't do it. And that's the thing. He wouldn't pay for new training. Anything that you said, well, we should do this, he would say, how much does it cost? And whatever the number was, it was always too high. And he would say, no, we're not doing it. And they just didn't do it. And it was just the rest of the league went and they stayed. New things happened. They didn't do them. So, yeah, it was amazing.
So I guess now the change, I guess, has to come, though. 06 was a glimmer of hope. That was the season I became a fan. You mentioned the Knuckleheads. A lot of people joined in on that exciting team. As you say, a cheaper alternative to go to basketball games. And the Knuckleheads were kind of at the time where the Lakers had Kobe and Shaq, and very high price tickets, championship basketball. You can come see, fun, not necessarily playoff basketball, but an exciting brand. But it really took off when the Chris Paul trade happened, and finally the Clippers were going to have consistent winning. For the first time, multiple playoff appearances in a row. When you heard about the news that Chris Paul was coming to the Clippers, did you think that it would end up like all the others where, well, he'll be there for a year or two and then they won't pay him? Or did you think that this could finally be Sterling wising up and realizing, if I put a good product out there, maybe my fortunes will start to change, or our fortunes will start to change, I should say?
Well, the irony is it was Stern, and nobody understood. It was David Stern. David Stern was running the New Orleans franchise at that time, and the trade was supposed to be Chris Paul to the Lakers, and it was kind of done. And Stern realized that would just look too bad. That a team he was running trades Chris Paul to the Lakers, competitive balance of the league. And he maneuvered it, so he went to the Clippers, which I just found amazing. But it is the LA market, and they had Blake Griffin. So I still don't understand exactly how that played out. I don't think anybody really does. It hasn't been looked into deeply enough. But Stern pushed Chris Paul to the Clippers, and that changed everything. Chris Paul is a professional. He's serious. He's a Hall of Famer. He's got his issues, but he has so many positives that come with him. And he immediately made them a real team. And at that point, I think everybody thought, well, it's still Sterling, it's still the Clippers, but Chris Paul's the real deal. And Blake was too. And it was pretty obvious that the two of them were two of the best players in the league. And now they had a chance to be really competitive, and they were immediately. And that changed everything, because now all of a sudden it wasn't any kind of a fluke or young players or we'll see. It was real.
Yeah, we got to give Blake Griffin a lot of credit too in terms of the changing the popularity of the Clippers. I mean, when he came, even before Chris Paul, in that 2010-11 season, immediately went from 14,000 people in the seats to sellouts. Like, he was a showstopper. He was the definition of a guy who put people in seats. And one thing you could guarantee with those Lob City teams was excitement. But somewhere along the Lob City timeline, the big change happened. the big TMZ phone call that changed the Clippers' fortunes forever and have them where they are today. We're going to be talking about that coming up. All right, time to close it out with where the Clippers are now. And it all changed when a TMZ phone call was leaked in spring of 2014, where Donald Sterling, everything that you had talked about in terms of, people saying that he was cheap, but also racist, rumors of that. Everything was released to the surface when he said he didn't want black people showing up to his games. He was talking to his girlfriend, who is definitely one of the people that should be credited with the Clippers transformation. And that moment where I heard that Donald Sterling had made those remarks, I was hoping, just praying that the league would take action. And finally, we'd gotten a blessing that the plague from the Clipper franchise would be removed, because it's kind of weird as when you're a fan of a team that has an owner that sucks and they're probably not going to win, but you're such a big fan that you're just sitting there taking it. It's kind of how Knicks fans are right now. And it's just like you're just praying and hoping because you love the name on the front of the jersey so much that something will change. When that phone call happened, what were you thinking? Did you think this was it? Like things are going to change now?
Yeah, completely. That's exactly how it felt, and you kind of knew it because it couldn't get worse. It could only get better. And the question really then was, well, who buys them? Then it was just a question of, okay, how good is the next owner? Do we get really lucky? Do we get kind of lucky? And you never know. It's going to be some super rich person, and you never know how that's going to play out. Some are great, some are just use it for a toy. So you don't know, but you knew it was going to be way better. And they had a really good team. This was a championship contender at the time. So, whoever got it was inheriting something seriously good on the court. And so all they had to do was kind of tweak it, and you had a chance for something really special. And sure enough, we hit the jackpot. I mean, it went from, the famous phrase is you go from the penthouse to the outhouse. This was the opposite. It was 35 years in the outhouse, and now you get the penthouse with Steve Ballmer, who is in every way the exact opposite of Donald Sterling, a guy who bought the team only to win. He doesn't need the money. It's not about the money. For Sterling, it was only about the money. For Ballmer, it's only about winning. And it's remarkable. And everything has flipped 180 degrees. The resources, they had none. Now they have all of them and extra. Anything more he can do, he does. It's just stunning for somebody who's been around it as long as I have to see how lucky they got and how this guy has pushed them forward so quickly. He had a learning curve. Everybody does. His first couple years, he made some mistakes, listened to the wrong people. They had some typical kind of Clipper luck in the playoffs, but then he made some pretty brilliant moves, and now they're poised and really only need health because Ballmer's done everything. He's hired the right people. He pays them. He's added staff, you name it, the training facility, and now a new arena. I mean, it just keeps coming. It's a flood of great stuff, and Clipper fans deserve it. NBA fans deserve it. Why not have two, powerful franchises in LA? We can support it, and now we've got it.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing too during Lob City was the fan wave. Even though the Clippers will not, for the foreseeable future, and maybe not in my lifetime, ever amount to what the Lakers have established, but now you actually can go outside and see people wearing some Clipper jerseys here and there. You see excitement about the Clippers. I was in high school at the time of Lob City, and if they were topic of conversation for sure. We came to school the next day talking about them. People were really talking about the Clippers, and the perception of them have changed because when I was younger, the Laker fans didn't talk that much trash to the Clippers. They didn't care that much. Now it's like they get triggered so easily, which tells you that things have changed, even though the grand scope of things haven't. In the short term, as far as Ballmer, you say he's the exact opposite of Sterling. The resume says it all. Steve Ballmer took over and bought the team in 2014. Obviously, as you said, Clipper luck, losing to Oklahoma City that year in the insane collapse in Game 5. But Steve Ballmer is going to go into his 9th season now as the owner. And the Clippers, in the 8 completed seasons, have made the playoffs 6 out of 8 times. One of those that they missed the playoffs was last year, losing in that play-in game. And they've had a winning record every single season. So that tells you and have been sellouts for the majority of those seasons, have been sellout every game. So Steve Ballmer has changed everything, as you said. Now he's put the right people in positions with Jerry West, with Lawrence Frank. I think one of the biggest moves was firing Glenn Rivers, bringing in Lawrence Frank and Ty Lue, and man, did he nail that Ty Lue hire so far.
He did, and the irony there is that the Lakers blew it. That's the funny part there is that they were going to hire Ty Lue, and here's the funny part, and this is the complete turnaround. For so long, not only was Sterling cheap, but when Jerry Buss ran the Lakers, they spent, right? They spent money all the time. They had money and they threw it at everything, and it worked. Usually does. And it's the complete flip now. The Lakers are the cheap team, and they've cheaped out, and they cheaped out on Ty Lue. That was a money deal. They wouldn't give him the extra year or two he deserved and asked for. And he had the integrity to say, you know what, screw you. I'm worth more. I'll wait. I don't need to be the Laker coach under your terms. They cheaped out and lost him, and they should have taken him, obviously, and didn't. And the Clippers pulled the trigger and got him. And, it's just ironic that the Lakers are now the cheap team and the Clippers are the rich team moving to the new arena. And one team spends a lot of money. The other is very careful about money and trying to figure out, because it's the mom and pop organization. It's hilarious to see the 180. And for Clipper fans, it's deserved to be able to kind of look at it and laugh a little bit and say, wow, you guys are the kind of the little guy now as far as money and resources, and the Clippers have it all. So it's kind of amazing. But getting rid of Doc Rivers took guts, and installing Frank and kind of separating the front office and the coaching was huge. And then Jerry West, again, a Laker who the Lakers screwed over. So the irony just keeps coming. He's the all-time Laker, and now he's up and run the Clippers, and they're doing great. So it's just kind of an amazing turnaround. To have seen this all happen is remarkable.
You talk about 180s and the Clippers being this and the Lakers being this now. I think the biggest change, I think that will stand out years and years from now, is that a superstar free agent actually chose to come to the Clippers instead of the Lakers when he could have gone there and teamed up and created the next super team. For Kawhi Leonard to do that, what do you think that does for the future superstars that say, you know what? I don't have to go to the Lakers if I want to go to LA and play basketball. I have an alternative. And has Kawhi Leonard set is he the first domino to fall in the future of basketball that stars could want to come to the Clippers?
Yes. Unequivocally, yes. He reset the narrative 100%. And that will change it, period. And the new arena, too. I mean, to have that coming in on the heels of that decision, those kind of things are very important to players. Legacy is important, but also where you play, the environment you play in, and the support around you. And for Kawhi to make that move and then ask, bring Paul George with you. And Paul George is the guy who also turned down the Lakers. So, you have two of the best players in the league who turned down the Lakers to be Clippers and are excited to be Clippers. And they have a lot of pull around the league, and people look at that. That stuff is very, very important, extremely important. So you make a great point. And I think it really reset that narrative and will moving forward, because the Clippers have the better arena coming up. They have the better resources, and they have a much better chance to win the championship in the next 2 years before they move than the Lakers do. So, yeah, I think all free agents now are thinking, well, they're not only a legitimate place to go, but they're probably near the top of my list, considering what they've got in place, moving forward. So, yeah, that was more incredible than the Chris Paul, because that hadn't happened. Nobody had done that ever. And Kawhi, of course, did it silently. The Clippers did it silently. Everything is silent with the Clippers. They are the silent assassins. Yep. You never know anything about what they're doing until they do it. It's kind of remarkable. That's partially Jerry West. But yeah, when that came out, that was a mind blower. That not only was it Kawhi, but Kawhi and Paul George. I'll never forget that. I looked at my wife and said, what? What?
That was insane. That was where were you when you heard moments?
There was no word about that. That it is. I mean, come on. Two of the best players in the league. That was stunning. So, they're all in. And I think around the league, the perception is now they are a top destination And it's not Clippers Lakers anymore. It's where do you want to go? They're equal, or I think the Clippers have an edge
as of now.
moving forward, considering the arena. Yeah, as of now, things can change, but not with Ballmer. He's going to keep every advantage. He's going to press every advantage he has. Uh, Even the stuff they do in the community with all the basketball courts that they've done, repaving the courts, putting up the hoops. I think they did 160 of them or something. I see them, when I go around to places, I see the backpacks. I'm in schools. Those kind of things take time, but they add up. And he's smart enough to put the money out there to do that, and the resources and the people, and it adds up. And over time, you're starting to see the effect, which is pretty fun, to see the perception. And also, like I saw the other day, a guy walking down the street with a Clipper backpack that I know is one of the ones they gave out to the schools. And I thought, okay, you wouldn't have seen that 5 years ago, certainly not 10 or 15 years ago, ever. So yeah, it's fun.
One thing also is when you say people know they want to be here. One thing we've done such a great job of with the Clippers is recently players really don't want to leave. Like they really want to be here. Lou Williams was devastated when he got traded. Blake Griffin was devastated when he got traded. Montrezl Harrell felt betrayed. Patrick Beverley felt betrayed. These guys want to be here. Nico Batum re-signed. I mean, it's just amazing to go from that organization where people didn't want to play here to the one where people want to be here long term, unless a really, really good deal comes up, like the Isaiah Hartenstein situation. But Kawhi and Paul George, I mean, they extended their contracts immediately. Chris Paul, even though he ended up leaving, when he first came to the Clippers, he had a choice after the 2013 season to leave, and he was like, I'm in to sign for 5 more years. So then I guess my final question is going to be, because the conversation around this year's team is the same one with everyone. It's, oh man, if we're healthy, watch out. So I know that's going to be the takeaway. So let me ask you this question. If the Clippers do somehow win the championship this season, what would that do to not only the perception of them worldwide and in league circles, but in Los Angeles? I mean, it's not going to be the Laker takeover thing, but just the seriousness that it would add for people in terms of talking about the Clippers if they won.
Yeah, it's night and day. When you win, it changes everything. So, I mean, other than that, I don't know what else to say. So it's unique because the Lakers are who they are, and they've earned it. Some of it lately, but they've earned it over the years. So it's unique in that sense. But if you win it all, nobody can really say anything anymore. And it does stop that narrative forever. And it around the country, around the world, it changes everything dramatically. Like I was in Paris this summer, and they have an NBA store there, and Paul George jerseys and Kawhi jerseys were there equally with, every other team. That tells you something. If they win it, that just goes up a notch. And that, is worldwide. Once you win it, it completely changes everything. So other than saying that, I don't know what else to say. It does. It makes all the difference in the world. And it just stops every possible narrative that you're done. You just have nothing to say. They just need health. They have the deepest team in the league. I don't think any question. They're the most flexible team in the league. The front office has done insanely good things the last 5 years. It's just remarkable, the run of really, really good moves they've made. And then, like you said, part of that is players see that and they want to play there and they want to stay, and they'll take less money to play. I mean, that's the idea that someone takes less money to play for the Clippers is astonishing, considering the history, and it's happening. And that's how you build great teams. You have those role players like Batum. He knows he's only going to play 20 minutes a game, but he's going to play big minutes in some important games in the playoffs. And that's what he wants. And he knows that's coming for the Clippers. And he knows he has a really good chance to win a ring and then retire. And so here he is. And it's going to be fun to watch. They need some good luck. They're deep enough to ride out the regular season, and we need to see what happens. But they, I think, should be the favorite in my mind on paper, and we'll see what happens.
Yep. So Jason, let them know where they can find you. Thanks for joining us. Of course, great insight as usual and great look at the past. Let them know where they can find you.
At Jason Levin 18 on Twitter. It's probably the easiest place to find me. I mean, that's it. My stuff is out there here and there. I don't write as much as I used to. I did have a lot of fun covering the league. And I will say that the Knucklehead Clippers, I was the West Coast guy for Basketball Digest at the time. They were as fun a team to cover as anybody in the league. They were hilarious in the locker room. They were fun to watch. And that was really fun for me. And it was the same time as Shaq and Kobe. They were fun in a different way, but they were also having issues. They were winning, but that locker room was not nearly as fun. So that was fun for me. And now it's just fun to watch it as a fan with my family. And yeah, you can find me on Twitter there, and I'm just following the league, watching games, having fun.
Maybe another episode for the internal conflict in the Knucklehead locker room. But to find me, you can find me on Twitter at Dime Dropper Pod. And you can find my podcast, Dime Dropper, on YouTube and on your favorite podcasting platforms for all things Clippers, Lakers, or NBA history. Appreciate you guys. Make sure in the comment section, you let me know so far, what was your favorite single season Clipper team of them all? Let me know. And of course, go Clippers, and make sure to subscribe. It's the quickest way to grow the channel.